Rooted and rising, take a deep breath. Let your spirit settle and soften into this message. As we begin, the cards will be visible during this introductory portion. So just take a moment to connect with them, feel into them, and allow your intuition to meet the energy before we move forward together. As always, of course, take only what resonates with you. Leave what doesn't. Everything is not for everybody, and that is okay. So, for some, this may really be something that just you hold on to, and for others, it may be wisdom, and you have bits and pieces that you hold on to, or just things you share with other people. And sometimes it's just a great story, right? All right, so when I speak of masculine and feminine energies, that's exactly what we're talking about, energies and not gender. So keep that in mind, okay? So if we have the Empress, she is highly feminine, right? The card is a highly feminine card, but the attributes of the card can go either way, right? So if we're talking about fruitfulness and abundance, well, obviously both genders can be fruitful and abundant, all right? Today's deck, we are working with a very interesting deck. I love it. And I used to watch this show. My sister, I think this is one of her, not show, but movie, one of her favorite movies. It's the Dark Crystal Tarot deck. Yes, it is the Jim Henson movie. So it's the Jim Henson's Dark Crystal Tarot deck. And then we have one oracle card from that deck that should be shown as the top card. From the Bibliophile Oracle deck. It's a very beautiful deck, for book lovers. It's a deck that, they will just really, really love. And from that deck, we have the Antagonist, okay? So in this deck, in the Tarot deck, in the Jim Henson's Dark Crystal Tarot deck, our vials, that will be our cups, as in how it correlates to the traditional Tarot, if it helps you to understand it better. That's our emotions, our intuition, relationships, the heart. That's our water energy. And you may hear Mr. Marco, the dog, over here snoring, and he is. He's laying on top of my hoodie snoring. Then we have stones that represents the swords, all right? That's our air energy, the thoughts, communication, strategy, mental energy, the mind, the mental. Our shards represent wands. That's our passion, our movement, right? Our drive, our action. All right. And even like creative energy, right? Gems, all right, that represents the pentacles. Although I don't think we don't have any gems for this particular reading, like a gems, GEMS, just so you know what I'm saying. That's our pentacle, our earth energy, stability, security, the tangible, the physical world. All right. And this is I don't want to say a pointed message, but this is a collective message, all right? This is about what happens when you're trying to move forward. You're trying to rebuild yourself, protect your peace, and create safety for yourself and for your loved ones, whatever that looks like, whether that's, just your children or partner and whatever dynamic that is, or just people around you, whatever that looks like for you, while dealing with someone who constantly tries to pull you back into chaos, confusion, control, or emotional games, right? So this collective read is about the exhaustion of having to think 3 steps ahead, right? Because someone refuses to respect boundaries. And Spirit is very clearly communicating that just because someone insists on standing in your way does not mean that they are the author of your story. Again, rooted in rising, this is a collective message. This is the antagonist versus the main character. So let's get into the heart of the message. All right, so we start from the Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal Tarot page of Vials Lore, Lore. So it also will kind of use the different characters on the card to kind of tie into their interpretation of the actual card. All right, as I think I explained in, one of the collective readings, how sometimes the guidebooks in the different decks will give their own meaning to the card that correlates to the traditional tarot deck. Usually it kind of amplifies the tarot. So the traditional tarot meaning. So in this one, they use the different characters to kind of coincide with the meaning. So Page of Vials, which, is likened to our Page of Cups. The Page of Vials is emotional openness, sensitivity, intuition, and the willingness to keep your heart open despite what you've experienced, rooted in rising. Right? And if you're dealing with a situation, person, or whatever that looks like for you, one where boundaries are continued to be, dismissed, you've been through something. So this is, again, the willingness to keep your heart open. You haven't closed yourself off to the world, to friendships, to relationships of all kinds, all right? And in this deck, Lore awakens and immediately begins trying to help and save others, which those, who are familiar with the movie, you're familiar with the character and the character's role. And if you're not, then, it's an old movie, obviously, but it's still a very good one to watch, right? So there's innocence in that. There's courage in that. There's so much courage in, there's so much courage when you have been through something that should have hardened your heart, but you've kept it open. You did not become bitter. You've learned to deal with it, through help, and whatever help looks like for you. Rooted in Rising is a collective group that does the work on their inner selves, the shadow work. So, that work allows them to be open, open still and not bitter, able to overcome, learn from situations, and remain open and not bitter. All right. Especially since you're a group that likes that, you take the negative and you learn from it. All right. And you grow. That's what allows you to stay open. All right. So anyway, Spirit is saying that you've continued to lead with your heart. All right. Even after being emotionally exhausted, even after manipulation, even after disappointment, even after having to constantly protect yourself emotionally. There's something here about trying to still create softness and normalcy for yourself and for those of you that have children, for your loved ones, whatever that looks like, even while carrying the weight of someone else's instability and unpredictability, especially if you have children. And if you have children with the person that's causing this and crossing the boundaries, right? And so Spirit acknowledges how emotionally draining that is, because this energy says, I should not have to keep translating someone else's behavior into something safer and softer for my loved ones to understand. For those who do have children, sometimes you can't usually disclose the fullness of things, or sometimes you can if they're grown, I guess, but while they're children, sometimes you have to explain things a little softer, and you have to filter what you can and cannot say, because all in all, that's still their person. Or sometimes the truth of the matter isn't soft, so you can't always disclose everything, right? You still have to protect them, even sometimes from the truth, until they're in a stage where they can handle that. But anyway, you still try. All right, and that takes emotional strength. People don't always recognize. All right, and this is again, for whatever your situation looks like, although this message is geared towards people or the collective who are in a situation where they have, to keep in contact with this other person, whether for whatever reason, and mostly it seems to be about children. But anyway, um, anyway, you still try, all right, and that takes emotional strength. All right, people don't always recognize the amount of strength it takes to be able to do that and keep it, to accomplish that and stay emotionally open. All right, what this looks like or could look like for you, rooted and rising, trying to maintain emotional stability while navigating conflict between the scenes, behind the scenes, right? Between the scenes and behind the scenes, during the scenes. Just saying. During the scenes. Yeah, I'm just saying. Personal experience. I'm just saying. Trying to keep it cordial in the moment, right? Protecting your loved one, whether this is a child or whatever this looks like for you, emotionally, while carrying your own frustration quietly. Again, you can't always, children are, very discerning. They know when something's wrong with you. They're in tune with you. Especially, again, especially the feminine, and not always, especially, but the feminine, you've carried them in your womb. So they're very emotionally connected to you. So when you are off, they know. All right. But you are still protecting it emotionally while you carry your own frustration quietly, because you cannot always disclose why something is the way it is, or why you have said something you have said, or why they can't do X, Y, and Z, or why they can't disclose a piece of information to someone they wouldn't think anything of, as in they wouldn't think there would be an issue to disclose that information. You're like, no, you can't disclose that information, but you can't fully tell them why. All right, which does sometimes create some discord, right? Anyway, wanting peace, but constantly having to anticipate disruption. All right, so we move on to judgment. Fizz gig, right? Well, you all saw the card in the beginning of what he looks like, right? So he represents judgment. Judgment is awakening, realization, seeing something clearly for what it is, all right? And in this deck, Fizzik secures the shard and ascends towards something greater by trusting instinct and intuition, right? If that isn't a message in itself, right? Definitely instructions, all right? Yeah, trusting instinct, trusting intuition, all right? Spirit is saying you already know what the situation is. You know what it is, okay? People don't lie to you about who they are. Their actions tell you. And a lot of times they'll tell you themselves. Believe them. All right? You already know what it is. So you're no longer confused by the cycles. You're no longer romanticizing the behavior or making excuses for it. Especially if you have children with them. You're not making excuses for it. And you're not even saying, well, for the children, I'll deal with it. You're not even doing that anymore, all right? You're no longer mistaking inconsistency for love or effort. There is a deep knowing here. And Spirit keeps bringing you back to your instincts, because your instincts have been trying to protect you for a long time, right? I can halfway laugh through it because I'm talking to myself, yes. Mm-hmm. Whether I've always listened to them, they've been right. But that benefit of the doubt, when you're a kind heart, that benefit of the doubt gets you every doggone time. I tell you, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Just one more chance. Well, yeah. Been there, done that. And this card, this judgment, this realization is speaking that you're over it. It's almost like Queen of Swords energy, where it's very direct. You are black and white, very discerning, very direct. You are no longer, boundaries, all right, is what you have established. Judgment, definitely the realization. You're calling a spade, all right? All right, so the card is communicating that you don't need more proof in order to trust what you already know. All right, and there's also something important here about not allowing guilt to override discernment. All right, especially those with children, we can do that. Well, that is their parent, mother, father, mother. That is their father. Well, that is their mother. That is their grandmother. That is their grandfather. Well, that is their uncle. Well, that is... No. All right? Because sometimes people who thrive on control will try to make boundaries look cruel, right? It'll be all your fault, right? It won't be their actions. It'll be you, right? How dare you? How dare you put me in my place, right? How dare you try to make me accountable for my own actions? That's what it'll be, all right? But all in all, if you got children, to them and to the rest of the world, it'll be your fault, all right? But anyway, so there's no need to make excuses for it, right? And don't let guilt override discernment. And a lot of times these type of people will try to use that anyway as a way to control you, get back in there by throwing it in your face, and whatever they know you enough to throw whatever they can throw in your face to invoke guilt. All right. If it's children, it's just, they need me around and you're keeping me from them. If it's, whatever that looks like for you. All right. Again, to these people, boundaries look cruel. To you, boundaries means peace and sometimes safety. A lot of times, both. Anyway, and Spirit is saying boundaries are not cruelty. Protection is not cruelty. Distance is not cruelty. Especially when peace has repeatedly been disrupted. And if it's been disruptive in a very unsafe way, then you definitely don't need to make excuses for it. You literally know what it is. It has not changed. It means they. So this can look like trusting your instincts instead of second guessing yourself and throwing away that benefit of the doubt. All right. You can forget that benefit of the doubt. All right. They're preying on it, rooted and rising, because you have a kind heart. All right. Don't let them use your kindness against you. All right. Recognizing unhealthy cycles very clearly now. All right. They're the victim, right? They're not accountable. They're the victim. It's all you. That's a cycle. All right. You try to bring accountability. They're the victim and they throw it on you. And then you feel guilty. They get what they want. They've never atoned. They've never been accountable. Cycle repeats, right? Same thing. Try to make them accountable. All right. They flip the script. They're the victim. You feel guilty. They've gotten what they want. They're not accountable. It's your fault now, right? Cycle repeats. We know it now, right? Choosing discernment over guilt. Queen of Swords did not come out, but be in that very Queen of Swords energy of just being very black and white, unbudging, unmoving on the boundaries. Queen of Swords has, very high discernment. All right. She's very clear cut. Swords does not rule in emotions. Emotions are over there somewhere. All right. So it's very rational. All right. All right. You can do it. Rooted in rising. And judgment is the realization. So you're at that point anyway. All right. You were likely already there. This is why you created the boundary in the first place, which is why the situation is what it is. Why the person or situation is what it is. It's why they keep constantly trying to cross over it, because you've been very in the boundaries because of the realization. All right. You're not having it. They got to figure out. They got to figure out access. So they keep crossing and testing the boundaries. All right. How can I come over the fence? It's like Wile E. Coyote. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. It was such a long time ago. He was always trying to get the sheep. And it was the episodes where it's like they both would clock in. The guard dog would clock in, and then Wile E. Coyote from the cartoon, Looney Tunes back in the day, they would both clock in and say, yeah, how's it going? How's it going? And he would spend the entire shift just trying to figure out how to steal those sheep. And the dog, obviously, his job was to guard the sheep, but always, you know, always Queen of Swords energy, like, no, right? Always kicking him out. And he would keep trying and keep trying and keep trying all day long, right? All right. Yeah. Looks like you're the sheepdog. Situation with the person is wildy coyote, constantly trying to cross that boundary. All right. Because you set a very clear one. All right. And you're not backing down on it. Right. That's the judgment, the realization that we're not doing cycles and games no more. You're not disturbing my peace. Very Nene Leaks, I said what I said energy. So they keep trying to cross it and disrupt your peace in any way that they can. So when you have children with them, it's very easy because they can use the children. But anyway, or try to, take what resonates, leave what does not, as I said. 7 of Stones is next. All right. This energy is the mental exhaustion from constantly having to strategize, root it in rising. The traditional 7 of Swords speaks of secrecy, tactics, maneuvering, stealth mode, maneuvering carefully, right? And in this deck, the question kind of becomes, because in their own interpretation of this deck, how much energy does it take to constantly work around someone's behavior? And Spirit is saying you're tired of having to think ahead in order to avoid conflict. All right? You're tired of wondering what information can be shared safely, what boundaries will be respected, likely none. What interactions, most times it's only what they legally have to respect, and then even sometimes not even that, because some are just straight out of their minds. All right? What interaction will suddenly become manipulation, likely most of them. All right? So there's frustration here. I'm laughing because for me, it's beyond frustration. But anyway, look, I'm telling them myself here. There's frustration here because you are trying to create stability while someone else keeps treating boundaries like obstacles to get around instead of limits to just respect. As much energy that's put into disrespecting and maneuvering, it could really just have been put into disrespect in the first place, right? And then who knows, maybe you would have never had to put the boundary in place. I don't know. Anyway, Spirit acknowledges that this kind of dynamic creates hypervigilance. That's an understatement, right? So especially when someone constantly tries to regain access, control, or insert themselves through emotional pressure, guilt, or circumstance. Mostly control, though. All of it leads to control. And with the Antagonist, Oracle card, challenge, hostility, disruption. Spirit is not saying that this person controls the story. They don't. Spirit is saying every main character eventually recognizes who or what keeps disrupting their peace. All right, and once you recognize it clearly rooted in rising, you stop expecting the antagonist to suddenly behave like the hero, all right? And that changes everything. It does. So what it looks like is feeling mentally drained from constantly navigating someone else's behavior. Moving carefully in order to maintain the peace and safety. All right, mostly that, right? Mostly the latter. Recognizing patterns of control, guilt, or emotional manipulation. Right. All right. They're not going to change. All right. You have, because you are a group that can change, because you're willing to, right? The antagonist is not going to change. All right. So 6 of Vials. I'm moving on along here. I'm not in the mood for extra stories. I know I normally do. But I'm tired today. But anyway, 6 of Vials. And if you haven't guessed yet, yes, I am mirroring this situation. 6 of Vials is the next card. And this is where Spirit softens the message a tad bit here. Because the 6 of Vials is nostalgia, memory, emotional reflection. Yeah. Longing for simplicity, again, it likens to the Six of Cups, and their definition in this tarot deck, their meaning is very similar to the Six of Cups. So this is where Spirit again softens the message. This is Six of Vials. It's nostalgia, memory, emotional reflection, longing for simplicity. And Spirit is, my dog is snoring so hard. All right, and Spirit is saying, part of what hurts is grieving for what you hoped could have been. Oh, yeah. Preaching to the choir. Not just for yourself, but for your loved one as well. Again, those who have children. You know, you may grieve for what could have been in your situation, however it pertains to you. Something that didn't work out the way it should have worked out. You know, again, whatever relational dynamic that means for you, for those with children, you know, having the whichever parent it is, be that the parent that they should be. All right. In a relational dynamic, the whatever masculine or feminine, you know, that didn't work out, didn't turn out as they should have, right? Or maybe even portrayed themselves to be. Maybe a totally different person than what it was when they were being when they were being courted. They had their work face on. We know, right? Yeah, definitely when I could say definitely when you were doing the baby making. They did, you know, you definitely didn't say, you know, well, they definitely didn't show themselves as, you know, who they really were, right? Right. So, again, this is kind of what was presented and what you thought you were getting as opposed to what you got, all right? And what you had hoped could have been the happy family dynamic, right? But it's not, all right? So not just for yourself, for those with children, for the children too. And for those without children, just, you know, in your partner, right? So there's sadness in realizing that someone had the opportunity to show up differently and chose not to, especially with you rooted in rising. You are a divine masculine and divine feminine. You're not an ordinary man or woman, whichever one you connect to. You're not ordinary, you're extraordinary. And so when they fumble somebody as extraordinary as you, it is heartbreaking. But that's the reason for this crossing of boundaries. All right. They want access to you. They want control of you. Right? They want all of the good things, right, that come from you and pour out of you, but only as it suits them. Right? There's no equal give and take. It's not reciprocal, only as it suits them. All right. And only how it benefits them. All right. And that is about it. That's the point of, you know, the boundary crossing is to maintain or regain the access. All right. Even if it's just your energy, even if it's just your emotional support. Even if while they had access to you, they pretty much dogged you out, right? Which is usually the case. Anyway, so again, there's sadness in realizing that someone had the opportunity to show up differently and chose not to, especially when there's children involved. All right. Someone could have created peace instead of, you know, creating instability. And likely, you know, the fact that they created instability made you quite unstable. All right. And, you know, some people are sick too. Some people reveled in it. Right? Right. I can say that. Some people reveled in your suffering. Yeah. Some had access to love and still chose control. All right. Some made you suffer on purpose and loved it. All right. Just saying. All right. What's that old song? Look at me now, right? Anyway, I won't go into that any further. Just take what I'm saying so you know you're not alone in it. All right. So you've got the judgment card, so you've realized it. You don't need to go back to that. All right. Maintain the boundary. Keep the Queen of Swords energy and move forward. All right. And do whatever's necessary to keep yourself and loved ones safe as well. All right. For those who those things are an issue. All right. All right. Okay. All right. So anyway, someone had access to love and still chose control. Most of this is about control because usually, people with these types of energies, these karmic energies, as the spiritual world likes to call it, people who are spiritual, the karmics. Usually it's about control. All right, lies, manipulation, half-truths, those kind of things are just about control. All right, and that's what they want of you, divine feminine, divine masculine, because you are no ordinary person. They see all of the wonderful things in you, trust me, and that's what made them gravitate towards you in the first place. It doesn't matter who made the first move, all right? They gravitated toward what was in you in the first place because of that. All right, so anyway, the grief is valid, over that, over just, realizing those things. All right, but you're not meant to stay emotionally trapped in the memory of something that could have been. All right, especially when you have an opportunity in front of you. Right, we have plenty of collective messages that you're in expansion energy, or that was coming for you, and the fruitfulness that was going to come out of something that you were creating. All right, it doesn't matter what that looks like, and it doesn't mean that it has to be something so very huge. All right, it's still something fruitful in your expansive energy, and that's here. So you have opportunity coming before you. You had a lot of partnership energies coming out in several collective reads, which was more than just emotional, So you had networkings and lots of social energies coming towards you that was in reciprocated energy, and you did have lots of divine partnership opportunities, readings coming toward you. So it's not like you're stuck and this person is it, and because all this is happening right now, that tells you no, they're not it. All right, you've got that good thing coming up or right before you as well. The karmics, especially women know that. Women know this, especially the feminine, right? When someone else is sniffing on his territory, all of a sudden you get that, hey, what's up text, don't you? Out of the blue, you be like, how in the hell? They sense it. Someone's sniffing my territory. Well, that's how you know, honey. Anyway, I'll move on along. All right, you're not meant to stay emotionally trapped. There's no need to, because you've got all this expansive energy coming at you, and partnership in multiple dynamics coming your way, or for some of you already here. All right, so you're not meant to stay emotionally trapped in the memory of what something could have been, because the danger of nostalgia is that it can make you soften the reality of what repeatedly harmed you. And Spirit does not want you to abandon your clarity just because part of you still wishes that thing turned out differently. And this could look like reflecting on what you hope the situation would become. Feeling grief around unmet expectations, or learning to separate longing from reality. You don't need to stay in that. Again, you're in that expansive energy. Again, you've got good things and good people coming your way. All right. So this is just Spirit calling that out, recognizing that the situation is what it is, but also reminding you that you are in judgment. You're in the realization of what it is. And the nostalgia of it all. The warning in that, but the softening in it, but the warning in staying in it. All right, and just yeah. So yeah. Anyway, the message is not about bitterness. All right, it's about clarity, and you're not in that. You're not in bitterness. You wouldn't have pulled the Page of Cups from the get-go, Page of Vessels from the get-go. If you were in bitterness, right, you were still open. All right, you're still open, which is why you're in that expansive energy, and why most of the collective reads are continually always having something to do with, collective energies around you. Merriment, the Three of Cups is social merriment. You've got that around you. You've got Three of Pentacles, which can, represent collaborations. Two of Cups is your, reciprocated emotional partnership, which can be your divine connection, but also business partnerships, different partnerships, whatever it is. Even the Lovers comes out a lot in your collective reads, which is your aligned choice, whether it's your divine counterpart or once again other types of partnerships. That's all around you. So you have to keep that in mind and move forward. We can't stay in nostalgia of what was. All right, and we can't change people either. That's the realization. All right. Boundaries need to stay intact, and you have to be very black and white with it. They showed you who they are. Believe them. Just because you've changed, they have not. They have no intention on it. Manipulation, control. For those, I guess, who have to interact, you know what I mean? Boundaries. Boundaries and boundaries. And for those who are in situations with people who are not the safest, obviously, do what's necessary and don't be afraid to seek legal help if that's what you got to do. All right. Okay. So again, this is not about bitterness. This message is about clarity. It's about the emotional exhaustion of trying to create peace while constantly navigating disruption is a kind word. And Spirit is saying, communicating, rooted and rising, you are not wrong for protecting your peace. All right, don't, my child, you are not wrong for protecting your peace. All right, don't let the antagonist, pull that guilt card on you. You're not wrong for protecting your peace. You are not wrong for creating distance. You are not wrong for refusing access to chaos simply because someone feels entitled. All right. The antagonist in a story often believes they could still have access to the main character, you rooted and rising, long after they've caused them harm. All right. And for some of you, they've caused you actual physical harm. All right. But the main character grows. The main character's growth begins the moment they realize judgment, that not everyone deserves continued access to them. And Spirit wants you to remember something very important. You're not just surviving the story anymore. Rooted and rising, you are the author of what becomes next. Again, you're in heavy expansion energy. All right. All right. Focus on that. Focus on growth. Keep those boundaries strong. Keep it very black and white, very Queen of Swords, where there is emotions is outside the door. All right. And protect you and your loved ones in whatever way that looks like for you. All right. As always, stay rooted, stay rising, and align with all the divine gifts ahead.